What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Floyd Street's Finest, a Louisville basketball podcast presented by Great Flood Brewing Company, and of course, a proud partner and member of the Field of 68 Media Network. If you have not followed the Field of 68 and its various social media accounts, get on that. What are you waiting for? We're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, of course. And you can follow all sorts of different great podcasts that come out, team specific, national ones, a lot of great different varieties of podcasts that you can follow and listen to about, like I said, teams, but also the national landscape and conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So if you enjoy this one, I think you'll enjoy the other ones. You can listen to your rival team podcast or whatever you want to do. We've got a great episode for you here today on Floyd Street's Finest. Interim Athletics Director Josh Heird joins the show, and I'm going to ask him a lot of questions about the basketball search. In fact, it's entirely about the basketball search, with one or two sprinkled in there just to kind of give people some background. We talk a little bit about his background in athletics, and also his time at Villanova and what that taught him, and a lot of interesting insights there from Josh about what that work was like at Villanova and how that has influenced what he thinks a good basketball program, how it can be run. And obviously anyone who, as of recording, we're the morning after or the afternoon after Villanova and Providence, and anyone who watches Villanova knows that they've got things going on the court, but it's also a really stable, consistent, well-supported program. And we talk a lot about what that looked like to Josh when he was there and what he thinks that can be at Louisville. And another little swerve, we do talk a little bit about NIL and its potential at Louisville and what they're doing to really make sure that that thing gets going. In the meantime, of course, there is lots of conversation without, I can't pelt candidates off of him. But we certainly talk about what he's looking for. We talk about the role that the search firm is going to play in the search process. And ultimately, he gives us a timeline in there as well about how long he wants this process to go. And I'll tell you right now, it sounds like things are going to be speeding up and probably already have in the coming days and weeks. So a really great conversation with Josh Heird. And before we do that, and before we get to that, let me tell you three things. First and foremost, make sure you rate and review the podcast. I think we upset a few people by mentioning their favorite, their coaches of their favorite teams as possible candidates at Louisville. And people who we've been told, who I have been told from industry sources are interested and would listen at least. So I apologize to those fan bases for pissing them off. But if you are someone who enjoys this podcast, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a nice review or at least a rating, and tell them Jeff sent you and that you like us. It helps other fans, and especially Louisville fans, find this podcast. Cards fans, Great Flood is going all out this season during all televised Cardinal women's and men's basketball games. Their drinks 10% cheaper for the entirety of the game. Pricing is available at our Highlands Tap Room and Middletown restaurant locations. We love hosting you and can't wait to root along with you as we cheer on our Cardinals. Thank you for your loyal support, and go Cards. And of course, as a side note, they're expanding their options in the tap room for the first time in 7 years, offering wine by the glass or bottle, and a liquor and cocktail menu is on the way for Sundays. At either location, you can enjoy endless mimosas. And a message from our friends at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now is the time. Not only is it college basketball season galore right now, the Super Bowl's over. Nobody cares about spring training for another month. Nobody cares about spring training, but also baseball won't matter for another month and a half. There's nothing else going on. So this is when you need to lock in and get yourself ready for March Madness by signing up with Bet Rivers Sportsbook. And they're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. What sets them apart is they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. And with basketball season, like I said, well underway. We're deep into the throes of conference play. It is very, very, very much so heating up. Really interesting season across the board, except for in Louisville, where we're all kind of in a holding pattern, wondering who the next coach is going to be, and seeing if maybe the current team can surprise us and finish out the season on a win streak. We'll see. Probably not, but you know what? Crazier things have happened in the ACC is crazy. So get in on the action at betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. And of course, you must be 21 years or older. And if you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Well, that's that. We got a great conversation with Josh Heird coming up. And if you haven't already, we'll have, of course, a tandem newsletter this week. I didn't do the bonus newsletter because it just hasn't been as much stuff bubbling up, but I will have a newsletter on Thursday for those of you who subscribe to the Floyd Street Tribune, jeffgreer.substack.com. Make sure you hit that up and subscribe today. $7 a month. And during basketball season, and especially now during the search, I'm getting you lots of content that I have just not seen anywhere else. So sign up today and stay in tune with what's actually happening in the coaching search versus tweets and other bizarre things that are getting floated out there. I will promise I will keep you informed with well-reported, thoroughly reported stuff, and you can enjoy that newsletter a couple times a week. This week, it'll be once a week. Next week, probably back to twice a week until there is a head coach at Louisville for the men's basketball team. Without further ado, here's my conversation with the interim athletics director for the University of Louisville, Josh Heird. All right, we are joined by interim athletics director at the University of Louisville, Josh Heird. Josh, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this. And we have been commiserating about parenthood, as I'm a new dad, 3 weeks old. So I want to apologize in advance if I seem overly tired and overly distracted by fatherhood. But welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Excited to be here and appreciate it. And yes, you are going to, you're just going to get used to being tired and multitasking and learning to manage your way through it, man.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So I wanted to have you on, and before I'll set the table for people. Obviously, I can't just start firing names of coaches off of Josh here and get his thoughts on that. I know Josh's role, obviously, in this is not would not permit him to do that. But I wanted to have Josh on because I wanted to talk about the context around this coaching search, what Josh's experience is. We'll talk a little bit about the search firm. But first and foremost, take us through, you don't have to give me like your CV. I think everyone's read it over the last couple months, but what is your background in athletics? And I guess, how did you get started in this? And what do you feel like has helped you along the way to put you in this position?
Yeah, that's a broad question there.
It is.
So, I think a large majority of your listeners are going to know that I was at UofL for 10 years and then went to Villanova for 3 basketball seasons, a little less than 3 years there. And then obviously came back. It's coming up on 3 years here back to Louisville. And I think I've had the unique path of working in nearly every department in an overall athletic department. And, got my start when I'd been working on Capitol Hill for 5 years out of college, and realized that as my boss at Villanova termed it, you didn't look forward to coming to work every day. And I think I had days I enjoyed going to Capitol Hill, but it sure wasn't every day. And so it's like, hey, I'm not going to do that for the rest of my life. I really need to find something that I'm going to be in love with, and I'm going to really enjoy going to work every day. And I remember my dad being a faculty athletic rep at Colorado State, as he was in higher education as a professor and as a dean. And then obviously getting the opportunity to compete at a much smaller, less competitive level than we're at here, but at the D3 level. And so had an opportunity to get my foot in the door here at the University of Louisville with Tom when he was the AD here, and will always be appreciative for him giving me that opportunity. And so I had a chance to go back to school, get my MBA here at UofL, and then just work in a number of departments, from the ticket office to the business office to the marketing department to events and operations to capital projects, and then parlaying that into overseeing the budget at Villanova and getting some sport oversight for the first time, and then overseeing a number of departments there, and eventually being promoted to basically their COO for the athletic department there, and then getting the opportunity here that Vince gave me as the deputy athletic director, and obviously more sport oversight over some obviously more high profile sports. And then, unbeknownst to me, December 13th, was named interim AD. And so here we are, just trying to make the most of every day right now.
Well, and that's a great segue, mentioning the Villanova aspect of all of this, because I do think it's such a helpful thing to inform someone the way they think. I always tell people, like, I covered high school sports in Florida before I came to Louisville, and to understand the magnitude of the college basketball and football in particular at Louisville, it helps to have covered high school basketball and football and all those different sports where those guys and gals are coming up. Tell me, what was the Villanova experience like? How do you think that maybe informs your thinking about, especially basketball? And I know obviously Jay Wright is a guy who a lot of people really admire and have a lot of respect for. I remember interviewing him at like the 2006 Big East tournament and thought he was just awesome. But maybe what was his influence on you, just being around him for a couple of seasons, and how do you think that might have impacted you now in the role that you're in?
Yeah, he had a big impact. He had a big impact. There was a number of exceptional leaders on that campus. Father Peter, the president, Mark Jackson, the athletic director, Father Rob Hagan is somebody that I lean on to this day to give me advice and counsel from time to time. And so I think I would constantly use the term leadership matters. And that was so evident on that campus because you had a group of really strong leaders that, and I think this is really important for people to understand, that their main focus, I don't want to say their only focus, but their key objective was to always make the best decision for Villanova University. And I think that's what I've been trying, will continue to try to bring here. And I'm not saying that wasn't happening previously, but I'm not sure that it was happening collectively. And that goes from board of trustees to the president to the provost. I mean, you just go right on down the list. And I think that was what was so neat about that community, is almost everybody that I came across, they just wanted what was best for Villanova. And so can we create that same culture and that same atmosphere here? And that goes for everybody, right? From the athletic director, like I said, the president, the basketball coach, the football coach, the rowing coach, it doesn't matter. So that we're collectively making decisions and saying, yeah, this is what's the best decision for the institution. And so that was really impactful to me, and to see how Jay approached that, because I think he was really unique in that he had the ability to understand, I think, a couple of things. One, the impact that he had on the campus as a whole. But he also understood the impact that a decision that he wanted to make, how that could affect the other sports or the campus community as a whole. And so he would at times take a step back and say, hey, while this decision that I want to make is best for the basketball program at Villanova, it's not the best decision for the university or the athletic department as a whole. And so I'm willing to say, hey, let's go in this other direction, and we'll find a way to achieve what I want to achieve on the basketball side in a different manner. And I think that's been really paramount for me as we've started this process is, as I've said, I want to make sure that there's a partnership between all of our head coaches and the athletic director, but especially the basketball coach, because they are so influential on campus in this city. I mean, just across the board. And so we have to have somebody who has the ability to look at the bigger picture and say that, if I do this or I make that decision, it's going to impact more than me and my basketball program. It's going to impact an entire city. And so that's been one of my, I guess, guiding principles. And I do think that that's been, that process has been unique for me too, because I'm not assured that I'm going to be the athletic director. I don't have any idea if I'm going to be the athletic director in, I don't know, 6 months, whenever it is. So trying to make sure that we make a decision so that whether it's me or somebody else that's in this role, they are going to have a true partnership with the basketball coach that we hire.
I wanted to ask you specifically about that topic, because I think it's something, I've developed relationships with national media guys, talk to coaches, talk to agents, and the conversation with any job always comes back to more than what I think people realize. Like, people will say, okay, well, it's this school or this school, and this is their conference, and these are their resources. And of course, Coach X is going to leave this school because it has lesser of those things, at least perception wise, to go to this place. Of course, they're going to do that. It's not that simple, obviously, especially for established coaches who like where they are and have good relationships where they are. So, I mean, you don't have to sit here and do your practice pitch or anything, but like, how do you approach that conversation then with people who might be interested in the job, or people who represent someone who might be interested in the job, to say, look, this is the direction the university is going, but I mean, there's an interim president, there's an interim athletics director, and people know that. I mean, there's no way around that. So what's your approach to that conversation?
Yeah, I think I guess I look at it a little bit like life, and I say life's all about timing. Right? You might have been when you were a sophomore in college, you might have been dating the most perfect girl you'd ever met. But for some reason, as I say, life got in the way, right? It just wasn't the right time in your life or her life to continue that relationship. And I think the same thing goes for coaching or for anything professionally. The timing's got to be right for the institution. It's got to be right for the person that you're trying to hire, right? And so I'm trying to think of an opportunity or a candidate or something. It's like, hey, I guess I'll use this example. I might think, or I'm very, I feel very good about somebody who is, let's call him a young and up and coming coach. Like, man, I know that coach is going to be successful, right? Everything is telling me that coach is going to be successful. But if they're 1 year into a job and they're 2 games below 500, the timing's not right to hire them here, right? It just that wouldn't fit. And so you have to take all of those variables in my mind and say, hey, what's the best fit for this university right now? And that could be totally different previously or in the future, right? I don't think I go back to my remarks about Coach Mack. I don't think anybody would have disagreed that 4 years ago he was the right hire at the right time. And obviously variables have shifted. And so now we have different concerns. We have different ideas as to what's going to make a coach successful. And I think that's my job. That's one of the most important things I can do, is to gauge what are all those variables so that I can hire the right coach for the right time here at the University of Louisville right now.
One of the things that will assist you in that is the search firm, as we all learned. Time is just completely off for me, but recently, I'll say, with the hiring of DHR and Glenn Shugiyama, who people across the country know who he is, was a guy who had a really interesting profile written about him in the Chicago Tribune a couple of years ago, but has been involved in some really high profile college football and college basketball searches. How would you describe the role of Glenn and the search firm in assisting the university and you in trying to find that exact fit like you're talking about?
Yeah, I think they're his firm is just a resource, right? I mean, Glenn's not going to decide who our next basketball coach is.
Mhm.
Glenn is going to provide information so that once again, I can make the best decision for the University of Louisville. So he's the one who's doing a lot of the homework, I guess is how I would deem it, right? He's the one who's collecting all the information on the various candidates, and even to some extent saying, hey, is this coach interested? Is that coach interested? Because if I was going to do that, I just wouldn't have time to do it all. And so he's out there saying, talking to agents, talking to coaches at times, and then also gathering all that information so that I have the ability to concisely look at all of the candidates and the pros and the cons that they would bring to campus here, so that we can say, hey, this is the coach that we think makes the most sense here, and this is who we're going to try to hire. And you and I talked about it briefly before we hopped on here. I think a lot of times there's folks that are like, oh, well, what's the AD's job? Like, why is he hiring a search firm? And I understand that. But on the flip side, these are huge investments now. Hiring a football coach, a men's basketball coach. I mean, these are multi-million-dollar investments. And if you look at the work that Glenn's going to do, it's almost, I wouldn't call it an insurance policy, but he's going to provide you with a lot more information to say, hey, is that multi-million-dollar investment worth it? And so if you look at the price that we're paying him and his firm, I would call it pennies on the dollar relative to the contract that we're going to extend this coach. Let's just quickly do the math. I mean, let's go on. We'll use the previous coaching contract. Let's call it $4 million. Use round numbers. 7-year deal at $4 million. I mean, that's close to a $30 million investment, right?
It's a lot of money.
And we're sitting here saying, does it make sense to pay $100,000 to a search firm? And 10 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you it does.
Yeah. Well, and then and we see the impact of it. And obviously COVID is a factor in everything, and probably will be for a little while longer, hopefully not too much longer. But I mean, it's impacted attendance and actual tickets scanned, as we know. I mean, this is a very impactful decision from a profile standpoint, from just having a basketball program that's successful, but also in the community, like you said, and in this city, the impact that, and I've learned this being here 9 years now, the impact that a successful Louisville men's basketball program has on this city and this region is immense. And we see it with IU just up the road. We see it obviously with UK and Lexington, just how important these programs are to this region. So I'm with you on the search firm thing. I used to be kind of a big anti-search firm guy, but I liken it kind of to like the vetting process for the vice presidential nominee when someone's running for president. You need a team to help you look through people and comb through their backgrounds and figure out if it's a fit. He had a really interesting quote, just to stick with Glenn for a second, in this Tribune profile. He said he typically likes to meet with the school's top stakeholders to ask some key questions. Do you want an experienced guy, a young guy, an alumnus, offensive-minded coach, defensive-minded coach? He'll observe the demeanor of potential candidates. If I sat down with you and I was Glenn and I just said, what do you want in a Louisville men's basketball coach? What would your answer be, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's all the things that I think a lot of people are going to come up with, right? And that's one thing you'll always hear me say, that college athletics, we're not splitting the atom over here, right? We're not curing cancer, but it's some of those things that you've already mentioned. Are they going to build a program that people are proud of? And so that means that the student athletes are representing this institution well. Yes, it absolutely means that we're winning basketball games. It means that the head coach and the coaching staff are representing this university well. And it means that they are connecting with this community and that they understand this community. And I think that's one of the things that can make this job difficult.
Yes.
is there's just so many constituents, right? And that's awesome because so many people care about this program, right? Like, and I'll use Villanova. Like, there's a lot of people in Philly that don't care about Villanova basketball because there's no connection there, right? So by and large, you're an alumnus. You met Jay, or there's some connection there that made you a Villanova fan. Whereas here, the connection is you live in this city, you grew up in this city, and so that constituency is so broad, and you have to connect with all these people. Like, you have to connect with so many different types of people and communities, and you also have to win basketball games and represent this institution well. And so there's a lot going on there. And so you really, for me, you have to dig into, is there somebody out there that has the ability to do all those things? And the other piece of it that's really important is this job's really big, like I just said. And so they have to have a really good understanding of what their staffing structure is going to look like, because nobody can do this job on their own. And so do they have that idea in place, and are they confident that all of these people are going to be successful? Because if you take one person out, or one person's not doing their job, that thing can just precipitously fall downhill. And so those are some of the things. I don't know if I answered your question completely.
No, you did.
But yeah, I think this is a huge job. And so I think that's why you go back to all the traits that you're looking for. That list of people that fit that, it's going to be pretty small pretty quickly.
No question. And it's not that, like you said, it's not that 50+1 strategy. I mean, you're not trying to win half the room and get one extra vote so that you can tip the balance. You're trying to get, you've got to have broad support. And as we've seen, I mean, it's been a difficult few years. Everybody knows this. It's not some, taboo topic. It's been a difficult, like 6-7 years for Louisville men's basketball. And I think that's where we've seen some constituencies speak up very loudly. And you're right. This is a very important hire to be able to communicate with all of those different groups and bring them together as much as they can. And again, winning, I think also will put a lot of people in the fold. That usually helps.
Yes.
I did want to ask you this, because I don't want to keep you too long, but I wanted to ask you the NIL stuff. I mean, it is, and we shouldn't even call it the stuff anymore, because it's kind of become like the most prevalent thing in college basketball and college sports in general. How do you view that? And because there have been critics of UofL in particular in the UofL community who believe that the university is a little behind. And I'm curious for your assessment of where the university is with trying to help athletes. I know there's some rules there that you've got to be careful with, but I guess, what is your view of how NIL can be helpful, I guess, for athletics at UofL, and how do you navigate the waters? Because I know that the leadership is intent on keeping UofL out of the headlines for the wrong reasons going forward, which is a big factor, integrity and all those things. So what does that conversation look like, and what's that approach look like?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things there. One, we've got the executive order, and who knows where the bill that's currently with the state legislature is going to go, but I would presume that we're going to have a state law here in the near future governing name, image, and likeness. And I don't think it'll be too drastically different from the current executive order. And so I think that's a really good thing, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to do a lot of things in that space. And from there, I think it's just what makes the most sense for each institution. And, a lot of people look at these collectives and say, hey, that's, why isn't UofL doing that? And I would tell you right now, I don't think we need to. I always use Starkville, Mississippi as the example, but there's just a lot more community engagement and opportunities at the business level here in Louisville than there is in Starkville.
Mhm.
right? Starkville, a lot of that's just going to be word of mouth, like, hey, let's get these dollars together and do it that way. Whereas I think our model here has been, no, we're actually going to engage business owners, and they are going to see some value, right? I mean, there's nobody out there who's saying, hey, I'm doing this, and there's no value add to me. But I think they find some value with their business and saying, hey, I'm willing to. And the other catalyst is obviously I want to support UofL and the student athlete, and
Right.
that's why I'm doing this deal. And that model's been successful for us to this point. And so how do we grow that, right? And as I said I don't know, a month ago or whenever it was, when I got asked about it or brought it up in one of our ULA board meetings, we have to try to maximize the number of opportunities for our student athletes to leverage their name, image, and likeness and generate revenue.
Mm.
I mean, that's really what this is about. And so how can we do that? And so that's why we went down the road of, let's create this NIL department. And that wasn't just, let's do it just to say we're doing it. I mean, we're going to be thoughtful about it. And we're going to engage a number of folks. And I feel confident that we're close to getting there to say, hey, here's our NIL department. And so as opportunities come up, or as we try to cultivate opportunities, this department's going to do that. And at the end of the day, it's going to set us up long-term to be more successful than, say these collectives or these groups of people that are just getting together and putting money together.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm glad that I'm not in college athletics on the administrative side with compliance, and I'm just glad I don't have to do any of that. So, well, last thing then, Josh, that this could potentially be a loaded question. You could tell me to buzz off. Do you have a general time frame, I guess, for the men's basketball coach? Like in the ideal world, you've got someone in place by date X, or is that less concerning to you than just finding the right person?
No, that's it's a combination, but that's important, right? I mean, we continue this thing through April, and next thing you know, we're not going to have any student athletes to compete on our basketball team. And I say that half joking, but I'm not, because almost every coach that we have now, they essentially have to re-recruit their current roster. Mm-hmm. And so imagine going through that process without a head coach. And so we're doing a disservice to our current student athletes if we don't have a coach in place sooner than later. And then obviously it goes without saying, it's a disservice to any of the high school kids who have committed to us and whatnot. So I'll speak ideal terms. Does that mean it's going to happen? I don't know. Ideal terms, we have a coach named here close to the conclusion of our season. And some of that is going to be impacted by whether or not we have candidates that want to have conversations with us or are willing to have conversations with us as their season might be going on. And then I have to weigh, do we want to wait that long if somebody tells us no? And that, that's going to depend on who the candidate is. And I think that will probably whittle that list down even more, because I think you do have to weigh, hey, timing is important. Once again, it's one of those variables, finding the right coach at the right time. And so, like I said, in an ideal world, it wouldn't be too much past the conclusion of our season, of the University of Louisville season. I think that's contingent upon obviously ACC tournaments and things like that. And but I think that's the goal right now. Now, once again, we're not going to say that's definitive. Like, hey, if we don't have a coach by March 11th, that this thing went off the rails. But I think as far as doing what's best for current student athletes, future student athletes, that's the way I'd like to approach it.
Okay. Well, that's soon. So we'll all be very closely following this, of course. Well, Josh Heird, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you giving some insight. I know it's difficult for people to grasp the amount of work that goes into this kind of stuff. But we appreciate you giving us a little insight into your thought process and how you guys are approaching this. And I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I appreciate it, and get back to nap time or whatever you've got coming up here with the newborn.
I'm about to get spit on when I go back upstairs. That's how this works. All right. Thanks, Josh.
Okay. See you, Jeff.